I don't know if you watched the games last summer where the Lionesses won the Euros, and it sparked an explosion, didn't it, in the popularity of the women's football game. And here to talk us through the opportunities that exist for brands in this space, here I'm going to hand over to Simon from 50. Simon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Thanks very much. I can't see my slides, even with my glasses on. I'm not going to be able to read that, so we're just going to have to hopefully I remember what I'm supposed to talk about. Yes, can I change the slides with that? Perfect. So I apologize. I've just had a massive lunch. So if I'm a bit slow, the slides are getting bigger. This is good. If I'm a bit slow, I apologize now for that. Just heckle me or something. I can't. Yeah, we're just going to crack on. So this is the brand innovation stage. I want to talk to you about a very particular type of brand innovation, which is brand partnerships. That there is an area of significant investment for most brands, but is an area that is mostly, in my personal opinion, living in the dark ages. There is amazing fan understanding that's available. There's amazing media opportunities. There's all sorts of amazing ad tech, of which you can sort of see some of the best in class here. Very little of that is applied in the brand partnership space. I am going to talk about football, I promise, but essentially I want to use a piece of a report that I work for a business called 50 Technology based in central London. We have a capability to, through proprietary technology, to understand and segment global audiences, and then through a genuine AI capability to translate that into buyable audiences. So the context of the analysis that I'm going to show you is that women's football is something that is evolving, it is global, it is a transient audience that every time something happens in the sport, the audience changes. Therefore, it's very difficult to track. It's very difficult to understand, both from a rights owner perspective. I see there's a man from the Football Association sat right in front of me, so that's helpful. But also from a brand perspective. But there are loads of amazing things to learn about women's football, and it can be used as a perfect example of what a modern modern investment decisions should be made and then activated. So, where are we? Started at the back. If anybody wants to read the full report, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Simon Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, and I'll send you the full report. This is a trimmed down version, but hopefully I can give you a flavor of some of the key topics and some of the interesting parts of the things that we've learned through studying the audience of women's football. Essentially, it is growing. It's growing exponentially ahead of all other challenger sports. I think I did a podcast with an ex-professional player last week, and we talked about how the focus is always on the women's game versus the men's game, whereas that's actually not necessary. That's not really the right way to look at it, in our opinion. It's a challenger sport, and it can be viewed up against other challenger sports. And against other challenger sports, women's football is absolutely killing it. Like the engagement, the social following, the social engagement, it doesn't matter which metric you use, it is growing, and it's growing really fast. The growth rate increases every time a tournament takes place. And you can compare it with England cricket, England women's cricket, you compare it with other sports that are doing very, very well, like Formula E. It's still growing a lot faster. And that's to visualize what I was just talking about. It is essentially doing well against all sports from a growth phase, both from a scale but also an engagement perspective. The next most interesting thing I think about women's football is the positivity around it. We'll come to some of the audiences that we revealed when we segmented the whole audience. But there's positivity not just in women's football, where if you look at rugby or cricket, there's just a general vibe of inclusivity and people wanting everybody to succeed. Now, there's another slide in a minute about tribalism. And Jordan Gard, who is the ex-player who I was talking with the other day, said this is a bad thing, in her opinion, which is obviously totally fair enough. Because one of the positive things especially from a rights owner's perspective, in men's football, is that tribalism and passion is a good thing, because it means you care. And therefore, the more you care, the more you're likely to invest in stuff, whether that's subscriptions or whether that's jerseys or whether that's season tickets or whatever. And the general positive vibes, do they signify less caring? I think that's still something to be decided, but it's definitely a very different vibe from men's football. I think you probably all have expected to see this. There are loads of women watching women's football. Actually, more men still watch women's football than women do. So it doesn't actually translate that just because there are women on the pitch that actually the audience is predominantly made up of women, but it is a much higher percentage. We work very closely with England Rugby, and they've seen that considerably. One of the big learnings across Red Roses especially is that there's huge swathes of the audience. This is something we learned probably 3 or 4 years ago when we first started working on women's rugby. This is when we were selling 3,000 tickets per match, and now helps them set a world record a couple of weeks ago, selling 58,500 tickets for a game of women's rugby. So it has moved on incredibly, primarily because they're amazing. They are an elite performance, world-leading team. But what was happening is the audience was 40% different from the men's game, and a lot of that was made up of women playing other sports. There was hockey players, there was netball players, there was swimmers, there's people that love going to the gym. But you know what there also was? There was women football players at a decent scale within the audience of England Rugby. And that tribalism, I don't know if anybody is a male football fan. If you're a football guy, you're probably not a rugby guy. And if you're a rugby guy, you're probably not a football guy. But that doesn't exist in women's sport. It's much more crossover. Essentially, women are just a lot nicer. There are a multitude of audiences. I'm not allowed to do a platform demonstration of our tech, but these are some of the tribes that we found within the audience of women's football. It's extremely diverse. To my point, it's significantly less tribal. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I think it leads us into the audiences that are engaging with it. It's all right. We can wait. First audience that we saw come out at significant scale is parents. And I put this in the easiest way to think about this, I think, is to think about yourselves. Not everybody's going to have children or want children or be old enough to have children. I have children. And actually, I'm a bit scared to take them to men's football games. Like I had to caveat it with my son when I took him to his first Tottenham Hotspur game. I apologise. That there was going to be a lot of swearing. Fortunately, actually, the atmosphere in that game was really positive because the home team scored early, and therefore he didn't have to listen to a lot of aggressive behaviour, a lot of really unpleasant swearing. The problem I have, as what I like to think as a progressive parent, is I don't want to put my kids, my daughters or my son, in an environment where that aggression is sort of being put out into the world. It's only my personal opinion. But I think that's not prevalent at the women's game. It's just nicer. People are more inclusive. Like there's a lot less aggression. And I think there's probably other people that would say that the sport is worse for it. But I guess my place is not to have an opinion. It's just to show you some data, even though I'm clearly having lots of opinions. There's a really strong and large group of Gen Zers involved and following and engaging with the players and the teams when it comes to women's football. See some of the stats there. Very difficult audience to engage. Every rights owner, as far as I understand it, is trying to engage these people. And the competition for eyeballs to engage the young audiences has never probably been harder. Especially when you're competing on a global basis as a sport nowadays. You're competing with American sports coming over here trying to sell NBA or WNBA. You're competing with challenger sports like Live Golf or Formula E or something like that. So to actually show that audience is engaging that football on the women's side is engaging lots of young people is really cool. There are other audiences, but for a third one, there's lots of people that play football that really like women's football as well. And I think this is probably to be expected. But it's there, it's scaled, and there's also that point of some people just want to watch more football. there are all these different reasons for coming to a new sport or a growing sport, and some people are coming there for the positivity, some for the lack of tribalism, some for the fact that they find men's football too aggressive, and some because they just love the game of football. And I think it's important to understand those motivations if you're a brand considering getting involved in it, or you are a rights owner who's actually running the sport. But it's not, there is, what we want to do next is run further research into much wider sports on a global basis from a women's sport perspective, because there's loads to learn here. And as far as I understand it, there are not many solutions out there to actually dig into this audience at scale in the way that we can. It's just sales pitch. But for us, it's having the respect to understand that each sport is made up by different tribes. It's not just a blanket thing. Like if you took the difference between, it's probably not the best visualization because we've screenshotted it, but if you say the colors represent the different cohorts of the fan base in each individual sport, when you see the makeup of the LPGA, England hockey, or you going to England cricket, for example, it's really different. It's not just, oh, I like women's sport and I'm different and I could like men's sport. Each sport is very specific and deserves its own deep understanding, which is what we want to do next as a project. I don't know where my time is, but we keep 1 minute. Key takeaways. It's super fast growing. It's got significant reach that's not slowing down. If it's a successful World Cup for the Lionesses, this is clearly just UK analysis. We can do it globally. It's gonna go up again, and it's gonna start. It's gonna stop being. It's gonna start competing on a significant level with lots of male sport. It's really positive. It engages lots of women. Lots of kids and lots of parents and lots of probably progressive people as well. It's significantly less tribal, but there's lots of value in all of those audiences. So it's from a brand perspective, it feels like an absolute winner. Like there's very little to lose, there's very little risk, and there's a huge amount to gain from a brand's perspective for investing in women's football, as far as I'm concerned. That's it. Thanks very much.
Amazing, thank you, Simon. And where can people connect with you after to ask more questions, maybe?
Yeah, so check out, the full report is on our website, 50.io, FIFTY.io. My name's Simon Eaton, probably best to find me on LinkedIn. I don't really use any other social medias, or simon.eaton@50.io. Always happy to talk about audience understanding, brand partnerships, and yeah. Give me a shout, even if you hate it. It's all good. Love to have a debate about these sorts of things.
Amazing. There's the challenge, a debate with Simon. Thank you, Simon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.